The morning sun barely filtered through the heavy curtains in Margaret Carter's hospice room. As she stirred awake, the weight of her past regrets settled on her like a leaden shroud. At 88, her body was frail, and her once vibrant blue eyes had dimmed with age. She lay on the narrow, sterile bed, feeling the stiffness in her joints and the shallowness of her breath. Margaret's room was a testament to her reality. The walls, once painted in cheerful pastels, had faded over time, their colours muted and lifeless. Medical equipment surrounded her, a constant reminder of her declining health. The rhythmic beeping of monitors and the low hum of life support machines filled the room with a dissonant melody. The white sheets on her bed were crisp and cold, offering little comfort. Her hands, once strong and capable, now trembled as she reached for the glass of water on the nightstand. It took a considerable effort to lift it to her parched lips. A heavy sigh escaped her lips as she realized that another day had begun. Another day in this antiseptic cocoon that marked the final chapter of her life. Margaret's thoughts turned to the past, a labyrinth of memories both cherished and painful. She had lived a life filled with secrets, choices made and unmade, and the weight of those decisions now bore down on her frail shoulders. The room seemed to close in around her as she recalled the defining moments of her existence. Her gaze drifted to the rain-smeared window, where the world outside seemed distant and indifferent. The view from her room was a blurry tableau of grey clouds and the occasional silhouette of a passing bird. She had no surviving family members to share her burden or to seek forgiveness from, and the loneliness of her final days weighed heavily on her. Margaret's fingers absent-mindedly traced the edge of the worn quilt that covered her. It was a patchwork of memories, each square a different colour and texture, much like the fragments of her life. She had lived through the Great Depression, a time of hardship and scarcity that had shaped her into a woman of resilience and self-reliance. As she lay there, she couldn't help but wonder how her life had come to this. She had once been a daughter, a sister, a wife, and a mother. But now, she was alone, facing the end of her journey with only the memories of her past to keep her company. The room remained silent except for the distant sounds of the hospice, a world unto itself, where life ebbed and flowed in quiet resignation. Margaret knew that she had reached the twilight of her existence, and as she closed her eyes, she couldn't help but reflect on the regrets and lost loves that had brought her to this moment of quiet contemplation. As the day's first light filtered through the curtains, Margaret found herself lost in thought. The hospice room, with its subdued colours and sterile ambience, offered little distraction. She had awakened to another day in the twilight of her life, and the weight of her past still clung to her like a heavy cloak. Margaret's eyes, once vibrant blue, now held a distant, introspective gaze. She contemplated the years that had led her to this point, the choices that had defined her, and the secrets that had remained hidden for far too long. Sarah Johnson, the compassionate hospice nurse assigned to her care, entered the room with a warm smile. Margaret had grown accustomed to Sarah's presence, her kind and understanding demeanour providing a glimmer of comfort in the otherwise stark surroundings. "Good morning, Margaret," Sarah greeted her softly, adjusting the IV lines and checking the monitors. "How are you feeling today?" Margaret hesitated, her gaze shifting to the rain-smeared window. It seemed like an eternity since she had seen the world beyond those curtains. She finally replied, her voice fragile. "Another day, Sarah. Another day." Sarah's eyes held a mixture of sympathy and curiosity as she continued her morning routine. She had sensed from the beginning that Margaret carried a heavy burden, one that went beyond the physical toll of her illness. Sarah wondered if today might be the day Margaret would choose to share her story. Margaret took a deep breath, the struggle to find the right words evident in her furrowed brow. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. Something peculiar." Sarah, always attentive, paused in her tasks and turned her full attention to Margaret. "You can tell me anything, Margaret. I'm here to listen and to help in any way I can." Margaret nodded slowly, as if coming to a decision. She began to recount an unusual event from her past, one that had remained etched in her memory like an enigmatic puzzle piece. "It happened many years ago, long before I found myself in this place," Margaret began, her voice quivering with a mixture of trepidation and determination. "I was in a park, sitting alone on a bench, lost in my thoughts. The day was bright, much like today, but there was a chill in the air." Sarah leaned in closer, her eyes fixed on Margaret's every word. "As I sat there, a man approached me," Margaret continued, her gaze distant as she retrieved the memory from the depths of her mind. "He was a stranger, but there was something about him, something peculiar. His eyes held a wisdom that seemed beyond his years, and his smile, though warm, carried a hint of mystery." Sarah's curiosity deepened as she listened to Margaret's description. The room seemed to fill with a sense of intrigue, as if the very air had grown charged with the weight of the memory. "He spoke to me," Margaret said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said, 'Life is a tapestry of choices, my dear. Some threads we weave with intention, while others are woven by fate.' I didn't understand it then, but those words have haunted me ever since." Sarah remained silent, allowing Margaret to continue. The room was filled with a palpable sense of anticipation, as if the unusual encounter in the park held the key to unravelling the mysteries of Margaret's life. "I ignored his words at the time," Margaret confessed, her gaze returning to the present. "But looking back, I can't help but wonder if that encounter was the beginning of a journey that led me to this moment, to you." The weight of unspoken secrets hung heavily in the air, and Sarah knew that Margaret had taken the first step in sharing the story that had remained locked away for far too long. Margaret's revelation hung in the air like an unanswered question, casting a palpable sense of anticipation over the room. Sarah, the compassionate hospice nurse, remained attentive, her eyes fixed on Margaret, as she waited for the elderly woman to continue her story. Margaret, however, appeared lost in thought, her gaze drifting to the rain-smeared window once more. The world beyond seemed distant, almost surreal, as if it belonged to a different time altogether. It was a world she had long since left behind, replaced by the stark reality of her hospice room. As the minutes ticked by in silence, Sarah decided to break the gentle impasse. She spoke softly, her words filled with understanding. "Margaret, I can sense that there's more to this story, something that has weighed on you for a long time. You don't have to share it if you're not ready, but I want you to know that I'm here to listen whenever you're ready to talk." Margaret turned her gaze back to Sarah, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. She had carried the weight of her past for decades, and the thought of unburdening herself was both daunting and liberating. "You're right, Sarah," Margaret finally admitted, her voice fragile but resolute. "There's more to the story, much more, but it's not an easy tale to tell." Sarah nodded, her expression one of unwavering support. "Whenever you're ready, Margaret. There's no rush. We have all the time you need." With Sarah's assurance in mind, Margaret took a deep breath, as if summoning the courage to continue. Her frail hands trembled slightly, but her determination remained unshaken. "I've spent most of my life trying to maintain control over my world," Margaret began, her voice quivering with emotion. "I made choices, some of them good, others not so good, but all of them led me to this moment." Sarah listened intently, her heart going out to the elderly woman who had carried her burdens in silence for far too long. "Sometimes," Margaret continued, "I find myself questioning those choices, wondering if I could have taken a different path, made different decisions. But then I remember that life is a tapestry, as the man in the park once told me. We weave our threads with intention, but fate also has a hand in the design." As Margaret's words hung in the air, a profound silence enveloped the room. The rain outside had intensified, its rhythmic patter against the window pane providing a backdrop to the weighty conversation. "Margaret," Sarah spoke gently, "whatever choices you made in the past, whatever regrets you carry, they've brought you to this moment. You're not alone in this journey, and you have the strength to confront your past, no matter how difficult it may be." Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she offered a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you, Sarah. Your presence here, your kindness, it means more to me than you'll ever know." The room held an unspoken understanding, a shared moment of connection between two souls on a path toward healing and redemption. Margaret had taken the first step in unveiling her life story, and Sarah would be there to listen, support, and guide her through the difficult chapters yet to come. In the stillness of Margaret's hospice room, the weight of her past choices and the anticipation of the stories yet to be revealed hung in the air like a tangible presence. Sarah, the compassionate hospice nurse, had become both confidant and witness to Margaret's journey through the labyrinth of her life. Margaret, her once vibrant blue eyes now dulled by age, lay on the narrow hospice bed. The room, a sterile cocoon, had become a sanctuary for the intimate conversations that unfolded between the two women. It was a place where Margaret's past could no longer remain hidden. After a moment of contemplation, Margaret turned her gaze towards Sarah, her voice steady, but laced with a vulnerability that had become increasingly apparent in her storytelling. "There's a chapter in my life that I've kept hidden, Sarah," Margaret began, her gaze fixed on a distant point in the room. "A chapter filled with pain, betrayal, and choices that I deeply regret." Sarah listened with unwavering compassion, her presence a silent encouragement for Margaret to continue. Margaret's voice grew softer as she spoke of a scandalous affair that had torn her family apart. "His name was Thomas," she revealed, her voice trembling with the weight of the confession. "He was not my husband, and our love was forbidden." Sarah's empathetic expression remained unchanged as she absorbed the revelation. She understood that Margaret's journey through her past was an essential part of her healing process. "The affair began innocently enough," Margaret continued, her voice carrying the burden of decades of secrecy. "We met by chance, and there was an undeniable spark between us. But as time passed, our love deepened, and we found ourselves entangled in a web of deceit." Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she recalled the passion and the pain of those forbidden moments. The room seemed to fade away, replaced by the vivid memories of stolen glances and whispered promises. "I was torn, Sarah," Margaret confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Torn between the love I had found with Thomas and the family I had built with my husband. It was a choice I should never have had to make." Sarah reached out, placing a comforting hand on Margaret's frail shoulder, a silent gesture of support and understanding. Margaret drew strength from the touch, a lifeline in the storm of her memories. "The day my husband discovered the truth was a day of reckoning," Margaret continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "The arguments, the accusations, it shattered our family bonds irreparably. My children, Emily and James, witnessed the pain and betrayal, and I could see the hurt in their eyes." Sarah listened, her heart heavy with empathy for Margaret and the choices that had led her down this painful path. Margaret's voice grew softer as she reached the culmination of her confession. "In the end, I chose my family," she said, her gaze fixed on the ceiling as if seeking solace in its blank expanse. "But the guilt, the regret, it never left me. It's a burden I've carried for a lifetime." The room was filled with a heavy silence, the weight of unspoken emotions pressing upon both women. Margaret had bared her soul, revealing the dark secrets that had haunted her for so long. Sarah, the compassionate witness to her story, knew that the journey toward redemption and forgiveness had only just begun. The room felt suspended in time, the echoes of Margaret's confession still lingering in the air like a haunting melody. Sarah, the compassionate hospice nurse, sat by Margaret's bedside, her presence a silent source of support amidst the heavy silence. Margaret, her eyes now filled with unshed tears, lay on the narrow hospice bed, her frail form a testament to the years that had passed. The weight of her past choices bore down on her, and the room seemed to constrict around her. "Sarah," Margaret finally spoke, her voice trembling with a mixture of vulnerability and determination. "There were moments when I wished I could turn back time, moments when I wished I could undo the choices that led me down this painful path." Sarah listened intently, her eyes filled with empathy as she absorbed Margaret's words. Margaret continued, her gaze shifting to the rain-smeared window. "I often pretended that my past didn't exist. I buried it deep within myself, hoping that the pain would eventually fade away." Sarah recognized the longing in Margaret's words, the yearning to escape the consequences of her actions. It was a sentiment many carried when faced with the weight of regret. "I understand, Margaret," Sarah replied softly. "Regret has a way of burdening our hearts and minds. But facing the truth, as you're doing now, is the first step toward healing and redemption." Margaret nodded, her frail shoulders carrying the emotional weight of her past. "I lived in denial, Sarah," she confessed. "I pushed aside the guilt, the regret, and pretended that I could go on with my life as if nothing had happened." Sarah offered a gentle smile, a symbol of her unwavering support. "Denial can be a powerful coping mechanism, Margaret, but it can only hold us for so long. Eventually, the truth resurfaces." Margaret's gaze returned to Sarah, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and pain. "And now, as I face the final chapters of my life, I can no longer ignore the consequences of my actions. I can no longer pretend that my past doesn't exist." The room remained silent, save for the rain's persistent patter against the window pane. Margaret's vulnerability and Sarah's compassion filled the space between them. "Sarah," Margaret began, her voice quivering but resolute, "I've carried this burden for far too long. It's time to confront my past, to seek redemption and forgiveness, no matter how difficult the journey may be." Sarah nodded in understanding. "Margaret, you're taking the first courageous steps toward healing. You don't have to face this journey alone. I'll be here to listen, to support you every step of the way." Margaret's eyes met Sarah's, and in that moment, a bond of trust and shared purpose was forged. The room, once suffused with the weight of unspoken secrets, now held a sense of hope. A hope that, together, they would navigate the stormy waters of Margaret's past toward the shores of redemption and closure. In the stillness of Margaret's hospice room, the weight of her confession and the determination to confront her past hung in the air like a heavy shroud. Sarah, the compassionate hospice nurse, sat by Margaret's bedside, offering a presence of unwavering support as they ventured deeper into the labyrinth of Margaret's life. Margaret, her once vibrant blue eyes now filled with a mixture of trepidation and resolution, lay on the narrow hospice bed. Her frail form seemed to embody the weight of the years that had passed since the pivotal moments of her life. She knew that the journey into her past would be fraught with pain and regret, yet it was a journey she could no longer evade. "Sarah," Margaret began, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's a pivotal moment in my life, one that shaped the path I would follow, one that I've carried with me like an unhealed wound." Sarah listened with rapt attention, her compassionate gaze locked onto Margaret's. "It was the day when my family confronted me about the affair," Margaret continued, her voice quivering with the vividness of the memory. "The accusations, the heated arguments. It was as if the ground beneath me had crumbled. Sarah observed the turmoil in Margaret's eyes, understanding the pain that those moments of reckoning had caused. "I was faced with an impossible choice," Margaret confessed, her voice thick with emotion, "between the love I had found with Thomas and the family I had built with my husband. The weight of that decision still haunts me." Sarah reached out and gently squeezed Margaret's hand, a silent gesture of empathy and understanding. Margaret drew strength from the connection, her determination to share her story unshaken. "The pain of choosing my family over Thomas was immeasurable," Margaret continued, her gaze distant as she retraced the steps of her past. "But it was a choice I felt compelled to make. I couldn't bear to see my children hurt, to see the life we had built together crumble." Sarah nodded, her support unwavering. "You made a difficult choice, Margaret, one driven by love and a desire to protect your family." Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she acknowledged the depth of her pain. But the guilt, the regret, it never left me. It became a shadow that followed me throughout my life, a constant reminder of the choices I had made. The room seemed to grow smaller as the weight of Margaret's words settled between them. Sarah understood that this pivotal moment in Margaret's life had shaped the trajectory of her existence, leaving scars that had yet to heal. "Sarah," Margaret said, her voice gaining strength, "it's time for me to face the consequences of my actions, to confront the pain I've carried for so long. I want to seek redemption and forgiveness, not just from others, but from myself." Sarah smiled, her heart filled with admiration for the woman before her. "Margaret, you've already taken the first courageous steps toward healing. You don't have to carry this burden alone. I'll be here to support you, to listen, and to guide you on this journey." Margaret's eyes met Sarah's, and in that moment a pact was silently sealed. A pact to navigate the treacherous terrain of Margaret's past, to confront the shadows that had haunted her for a lifetime, and to find the redemption and closure she so desperately sought. The room, once heavy with unspoken secrets, now held a sense of purpose, a purpose that would lead them both into the heart of Margaret's past, and, ultimately, toward the possibility of healing and forgiveness. In the intimate confines of Margaret's hospice room, the weight of her past choices and the determination to seek redemption and forgiveness hung in the air like an unspoken promise. Sarah, the compassionate hospice nurse, had become both confidant and guide on Margaret's journey through the labyrinth of her life. Margaret, her eyes reflecting a newfound sense of purpose, lay on the narrow hospice bed. The room, a haven for the intimate conversations that unfolded between the two women, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the stories yet to be revealed. "Sarah," Margaret began, her voice steady and resolute, "as I delve deeper into my past, there are individuals who played pivotal roles in the events that transpired. Some were allies, others, well, enemies." Sarah leaned in, her eyes filled with curiosity and empathy, ready to listen to the stories of the people who had shaped Margaret's life. Margaret's gaze turned inward as she recalled the individuals who had entered her world during those tumultuous years. "There was my husband, Edward," she began, her voice softening with the memory. "He was a good man, devoted to our family. The pain in his eyes when he discovered my affair was a wound that never truly healed." Sarah listened attentively, recognizing the complexity of Margaret's relationships and the weight of the choices she had made. "Then there were my children, Emily and James," Margaret continued, her voice tinged with sorrow. "They witnessed the unravelling of our family, the arguments, the betrayal. I could see the hurt in their eyes, and I knew that my choices had scarred them deeply." Sarah's heart ached for Margaret and the pain she had caused to those she loved most. She understood the heavy burden of regret that Margaret carried. Margaret's storytelling continued as she revealed the presence of allies in her life. "And then there was Elizabeth," she said, her voice warming with affection. My dearest friend and confidant, who stood by me through the darkest days of my life. She offered me solace and understanding when I needed it most. Sarah recognized the importance of companionship and support during challenging times. Elizabeth sounds like a true friend, she commented. Margaret nodded, her gratitude evident. She was my anchor in a storm of uncertainty, a source of strength when I felt lost. The room seemed to hold its breath as Margaret's storytelling unfolded, revealing the individuals who had shaped her life's narrative. Each name carried its own weight, its own story of connection and consequence. Margaret turned her gaze to Sarah, a silent plea for understanding and compassion. Sarah, as I confront my past and seek redemption, I need to find a way to make amends with those I've hurt, especially my children. But the path ahead is fraught with uncertainty, and I don't know where to begin. Sarah's reassuring smile conveyed her unwavering support. Margaret, you've already taken the first step by sharing your story. Together, we'll navigate the complexities of your past, and I'll be here to help you find a way to heal those wounds and seek forgiveness. Margaret's eyes glistened with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The room, once heavy with the weight of unspoken secrets, now held a sense of purpose, a purpose that would lead them both toward the possibility of reconciliation and redemption. In the hushed confines of Margaret's hospice room, the weight of her past choices and the determination to seek redemption and forgiveness permeated the air. Sarah, the compassionate hospice nurse, had become both confidant and guide on Margaret's journey through the labyrinth of her life. Margaret, her eyes now reflecting a newfound sense of purpose, lay on the narrow hospice bed. The room, a sanctuary for the intimate conversations that unfolded between the two women, seemed to pulse with anticipation of the stories yet to be shared. Sarah, Margaret began, her voice steady and resolute, as I delve deeper into my past, I realize that the journey toward redemption is not a straightforward path. It's filled with challenges and trials that I must face. Sarah leaned in, her eyes filled with understanding, ready to listen to Margaret's account of the trials that lay ahead. Margaret's gaze turned inward as she contemplated the trials that awaited her. My first challenge is to reconnect with my children, Emily and James, she explained. I must find a way to bridge the chasm that my choices created between us. Sarah nodded in acknowledgement of the difficult task ahead. Rebuilding those connections will require time, patience, and open communication, she advised. But it's a worthy endeavour. Margaret continued to share her thoughts. Then there's the challenge of addressing the pain I caused my husband Edward, she said, her voice tinged with regret. I need to find a way to offer him closure, even if it means confronting the hurt I inflicted. Sarah recognized the complexity of Margaret's journey, with its painful confrontations and difficult conversations. Closure is a step toward healing for both you and Edward, she affirmed. Margaret's storytelling extended to her friend, Elizabeth. And then there's Elizabeth, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. I owe her the truth about the choices I made during those turbulent years. It's a conversation I've avoided for far too long. Sarah admired Margaret's commitment to honesty and transparency. Telling Elizabeth the truth will be a testament to your growth and your desire for genuine reconciliation. As the room filled with the weight of the challenges Margaret would face, she turned her gaze to Sarah, seeking guidance and reassurance. Sarah, I'm prepared to confront these trials, but I know that the path ahead won't be easy. I'll need your support and guidance every step of the way. Sarah's reassuring smile conveyed her unwavering commitment. Margaret, you've already shown incredible strength and courage by sharing your story and embracing the journey of redemption. I'll be here to support you through the challenges, to offer guidance when needed, and to celebrate your victories. Margaret's eyes held a mixture of determination and vulnerability. The room, once heavy with the weight of unspoken secrets, now held a sense of purpose, a purpose that would lead them both toward the possibility of healing, reconciliation, and a brighter future. In the quiet solitude of Margaret's hospice room, the weight of her past choices and the trials she had faced on her journey toward redemption had transformed into a profound sense of self-discovery and healing. Sarah, the compassionate hospice nurse, had become both a confidant and a guiding light on Margaret's path. Margaret, her once clouded eyes now clear and determined, lay on the narrow hospice bed. The room, a witness to the intimate conversations and the emotional journey that had unfolded between the two women, now held a tranquil stillness, a stillness that marked a significant turning point in Margaret's life. "Sarah," Margaret began, her voice filled with a newfound confidence, "as I've navigated the trials on the road to redemption, I've discovered something within myself, a resilience I didn't know I possessed." Sarah listened attentively, her eyes reflecting her admiration for Margaret's growth and transformation. Margaret continued, her words carrying the weight of her experiences. "I've reconnected with my children, Emily and James, and though the path was rocky, our bond is stronger than ever. The wounds of the past are healing, and forgiveness has become a beacon of hope in our relationship." Sarah's smile conveyed her happiness for Margaret's progress. "Rebuilding those connections was a courageous step, Margaret. It's a testament to your strength and determination." Margaret's gaze turned to the next chapter in her journey. "I faced my husband, Edward, and though our conversations were difficult, they were necessary. I offered him the closure he deserved, and in doing so, I found a measure of peace." Sarah recognized the significance of Margaret's actions. "Closure can be a balm for the soul, Margaret. It allows both parties to move forward with a sense of resolution." Margaret's storytelling extended to her friend, Elizabeth. "I shared the truth with Elizabeth, and she offered me a forgiveness I never expected. Our friendship has been rekindled, stronger than ever, and I'm grateful for her unwavering support." Sarah admired Margaret's honesty and vulnerability. "True friendship withstands the test of time and honesty. Elizabeth sounds like an exceptional friend." Margaret's voice held a note of gratitude as she addressed Sarah directly. "And, Sarah, your presence throughout this journey has been my guiding light. Your compassion, your wisdom, and your unwavering support have helped me find the strength to confront my past and embrace a brighter future." Sarah's eyes glistened with emotion as she replied, "Margaret, you've shown immense courage and resilience in facing your past, seeking redemption, and rebuilding your relationships. It's been an honor to be part of your journey." Margaret's journey of redemption had brought her to a place of self-discovery and transformation. The room, once filled with the weight of unspoken secrets and regrets, now held a sense of renewal, a renewal of hope, forgiveness, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As the rain continued to patter against the window pane, Margaret closed her eyes, taking a deep, contented breath. The final chapter of her life was still unwritten, but she faced it with a heart unburdened by the weight of the past, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead.